ሰላም ተኸታተልቲ መደብ ኣሰና ዝኻብ ከተማ ለንደን ኣብ ዓዲ እንግሊዝ እንዳተዳለወ ዝበፅሓኩም ዘሎ መደብና መደብ ኤርትራውያን እዩ ኣብዚ ኩሉ ነገር ኣብ ኣፀጋሚ ኩነታት ኣትይዎ ዘሎ ዞባ ውግእ ኮይኑዎ ዘሎ ህሞት ኢና ንራኸብ ዘለና ነዚ ከዓኒ ሓደ ነገራት ክንመያየጥ ብፍላይ ከዓኒ እዚ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ተኸሲቱ ዘሎ ኩናት ውግእ ናይ ውግእ ሓድሕድ ክዶ ክንብሎ እዚ ከመይ ገይሩ ንሃገርና ኤርትራ ከምኡውን ንቀርኒ ኣፍሪካ ንዞባና ከመይ ገይሩ ይፀሉ እንታይ ክንጥንቀቐሉ ዘለና ኩነታት ኣሎ ኣብ ዝብል ምስ ፕሮፌሰር ሼቱል ትሮንቮል ክንዘራረብ ተዓዳዲምና ኣለና ፕሮፌሰር ሼቱል ካብ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ኦፍ ኦስሎ እዩ ኣብኡ ከዓኒ ናይ ሰላም ናይ conflict resolution expert እዩ ምክንያትና ፀዊዕና ዘለና welcome Kjetil. It's an honor once again to be welcoming you to the Eritrean show on Asena to be talking about unfortunately things that all of us have would rather not talk about, the conflict in Ethiopia. You were there recently. Maybe we should start there. What was going on at the time that you were there? Was something like this inevitable?
Yes, sadly, it was a war which had been announced for a long time. Already in January, February this year, I started to warn the international community about a conflict on the horizon. And we have seen it clearly developing along those trajectories. It is not a surprise that the war broke out last week, also in the shadow of the US elections, which was expected, considering the recent weeks or the recent month escalation in rhetoric and actions on the ground, pitching both the federal government and the Tigray regional government against each other.
And who do we know are the actors so far? I mean, maybe exactly what happened last Tuesday, actually, exactly a week ago. What have you pieced it together? Do you understand what did occur on that day? Because there are conflicting versions of what happened on that day.
Yes, it is. And we have to be aware of that the first victim of war is the truth. Everything which comes out as official information, either from Addis Ababa or from the Tigray regional government, should be taken with a pinch of salt, at least. We do have a general understanding to the run-up to the war that we have reports of federal army troop deployments going back about 12 days, 2 weeks, that they started to send reinforcement to the north. And certainly before 10 days ago, it was clear signals that they were amassing troops on the Wolkite front line, also sending reinforcement to other areas. I think, and knowing then that Tuesday last week was the election day in US, when all the world was looking at Washington, D.C. and what's happening there instead of what's happening in the region as the Horn, that was an opportune day to start a conflict if you want to avoid international attention. What actually happened on that Tuesday itself, it's hard to judge. The government of Ethiopia blames TPLF and the Tigray authorities to then assume control over the northern command by violence, which were the triggering factor according to them. From the Tigray regional authorities, they deny that, or that itself was the triggering factor. They said then that federal authorities have already staged an initial movement they reacted to. I think a plausible thing here is to judges at Tigray seeing the deployment, seeing the reinforcement, expecting an attack any time, and in order to leave the northern command as it is, that could be used against them in their midst, so to say. since the headquarters being based in Mekelle, and you have troops all over the region. So for TPLF, it was necessary to neutralize that threat in order to concentrate on the Western front line and the Southern front lines. Kind of a preemptive move, if you would like to use that term. What is more concerning is that just from yesterday and today, a new narrative is peddled by the federal government and Amhara diaspora environments, that it was a gruesome kind of assassination of certain troops in the Northern Command, which is not at all verified by any independent source. So I think that narrative should be taken with a very high degree of skepticism. And I see it as unlikely that such a thing would unfold. But anyway, the trigger were last Tuesday evening, as you say.
And this Northern Division, I understand it to be the largest contingent within the Ethiopian army. I also understand the fact that it was stationed there for so long, anticipating, or in the event that an attack from Eritrea, at least that was the context under which that division was stationed there. What do we understand as to what kind of ammunitions and what kind of training and what is the Northern Division like? Why is it so significant?
It's the Northern Command, meaning that the headquarters for all military personnel stationed in Tigray up to the border with Eritrea. And obviously that has been the most important command sector in the Federal Forces of Ethiopia since the 1998-2000 war. You have the most equipped divisions, the mechanized divisions, the artillery. Most of these heavy military equipment are stationed in Tigray and has been used as a deterrence to Eritrea and President Isaias Afwerki, and because that's where the threat has been perceived to come from until the so-called peace process started then 2 years ago. So yes, estimates range from 50 to 70% of the artillery and mechanized divisions equipment are stationed in Tigray. So it was, of course, essential for Tigrayan authorities to assume control over this equipment, first and foremost, but also then to convince the personnel to join them against the struggle against the federal authorities, or at least then neutralize the threat they could possibly pose. We know that contingent of the Northern Command managed to flee over to Eritrea, who were not detained or not joining the TPLF, so to say. How many managed to flee, we don't know, both on the Zalambesa but also on the Badme lines. Also, many fled over to Sudan. In the TPLF, or Tigrayan Authority, states that about 60% of the personnel remained loyal to Tigray, and the rest either fled or were disarmed and transported to Sudan or to southern parts of Tigray to be left to the Ethiopian side, so to say.
I'm very interested, as you know, on the impact on Eritrea and the wider region, and that's the purpose of this program. But before I go into that, I just wanted to stay with the situation, with the background to the situation, or the current situation. You talked about talks about the gruesome killing of military personnel, but do we know as of yet of casualties, numbers? What do we know about what the impact has been so far?
Well, it is an active warfare taking place. The main offensive after that Tuesday, the Wednesday offensive, started on the Wolkite front line, where Amhara militia and Amhara regional special forces, together with ENDF deployment, started the offensive. It was a 3-day offensive, as far as we understand, with 5 major attacks. From the south, then from the federal Ethiopia towards Tigrayan controlled areas. We understand it that Tigray regional special forces, they did a tactical retreat to higher elevated terrain and more defensive positions. The federal and Amhara forces retook Dansha village area in the middle of the plain, so to say, on the Wolkite. But with reported but not confirmed heavy casualties. Particularly on the Amhara federal forces side, which seems natural since the Tigrayans were in defensive positions and Amhara and federal forces undertook the attack and the offensive. But there are no confirmed number of deaths, but I saw that a federal military spokesperson claimed that 500 were killed on the Tigrayan side, with not disclosing the casualty rates on their side. Mekele has issued estimates that the casualties on Amhara federal side runs in the lower thousands, 2,000-3,000 people. So it is heavy losses already during those first 3 days of fighting.
Yeah, and I understand already there have been kind of offers of mediation from IGAD and calls for restraint from the African Union and from the UN as well. Am I right? Have there been any responses to those? Is anybody welcoming those at either side?
Yes, all international engagement over the last week, it's escalating, so to say. AU chair, IGAD chair, EU envoys, UN Secretary General, other bilateral envoys have all pled for a ceasefire and that a political negotiation should assume. TPLF and Tigrayan authorities and Dr. Debretsion have called for that themselves. They are open to sit down and talk. All those initiatives, however, have been rejected by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed as not relevant, and he has returned it by saying we will settle this on the battlefields rather quickly. It is just a matter of days. They claim that TPLF will be annihilated and we have control over Tigray, so no needs for talk, the federal authorities state.
Is that realistic? Do you think it will only be a matter of days? And what will happen if restraint and negotiations are not effected quickly? Where is this going?
Well, I have been researching, sadly enough, now 3 major wars in the northern Ethiopian terrain in my lifetime. Both the EPLF and TPLF struggle against the Derg regime, the 1998-2000 war between Eritrea and Ethiopia. I was living and doing research in Tigray, and now this is the 3rd round of major conflict. There is at least, to respond to you, there is no historical evidence, there is no empirical evidence, there is no political evidence or military evidence that this is a short, quick campaign and TPLF Tigray will cave in a matter of days. That is totally detached every analytical frame we can use in order to try to understand how this conflict will evolve on the ground. considering both the military capacity, the terrain, the readiness of the people, and what they are fighting for. So, and that's the tragedy of it. You don't see any solution here through a military campaign, in my view. This cannot be settled on the battlefields.
Right. Unfortunately, it's bigger than Ethiopia itself.